Mayor Scott Fadness has been an integral part of Fishers for many years. Previously, as Fishers Deputy Town Manager of Operations, Fadness was responsible for overseeing day-to-day operations of public works, engineering, fleet management, and parks and recreation. In 2011, he became the town manager of Fishers and became responsible for the day-to-day operations of the town, including leading a team of 11 department directors. On Monday, December 22nd, Scott was sworn in as the first mayor of the city of Fishers. Mayor Fadness is a board member of Alternatives Incorporated of Madison County and the Hamilton County Humane Society. He's also a member of the Hamilton County Disaster Action Team for the American Red Cross, and Fadness was named a finalist in the 2011, 2012, and 2013 Best and Brightest of Central Indiana, named one of IBJ's 2013 40 Under 40, and a recipient of the 2013 Indiana Public Service Award in the category of Outstanding Public Sector Professional. Scott holds a master's degree in public affairs from Indiana University, is a member of the Government Finance Officers Association and the Indiana Controllers Affiliate Group. He lives in Fishers with his wife Anna and son Lincoln. And again, let's all welcome to give the first state of the city for the city of Fishers, Mayor Scott Fadness.
Thank you. Thank you. Please have a seat. Have a seat. Thank you very much. It's all downhill from there. Rhonda, thank you so much for that warm introduction. And I can't tell you today how grateful I am to be standing here. And it's not only because of the journey that we collectively have been on in regard to this transition to a city. But as many of you know, Anna and I just recently welcomed the newest addition, our first addition to our family, a wonderful little boy named Lincoln. And what they don't tell you in the books on child rearing and what they don't tell you in the movies is that when you take your son to daycare, when you pick him up, he brings home a number of communicable diseases. And over the last week and a half, Anna and I have been living the gauntlet of every kind of cough and flu and sinus thing you can imagine. So I apologize ahead of time if my voice sounds a little scratchy, and I take a few water breaks because honestly, as of yesterday at noon, I had no voice. But I did plan for the contingency as if I wasn't able to finish his speech, and Kurt Meyer has graciously volunteered. He will be doing an interpretive dance about the future of Fishers. So, Kurt, if you could go warm up, that'd be great. You know, in all honesty, I struggled a little bit thinking about this speech today. In an era of so many political speeches that are filled with empty rhetoric and political promises, I wondered how I was going to be able to communicate to you effectively my unwavering optimism about the future of this community, and at the same time inspire you to be equally as optimistic. It's probably a task better suited for an orator far better than I am, but in their absence, the only thing I can do today is speak plainly and honestly to you about the future of our community, and hopefully having you walk out those doors a little more intrigued about our community. You know, I have lived and worked and breathed city government for almost a decade. And there's one particular question that we do not like to answer in government. It's a complicated question. It's not who, it's not what, it's not when, it's why. Why are we doing the things that we are doing here in our community? And so today, I wanted to take a moment and really explain why we're doing the things that we're doing. Because when we don't do that, we run into problems, we miscommunicate. And let me give you a perfect example of this. It's kind of a silly story, but bear with me. So I grew up, as many of you know, in North Dakota. And in between undergraduate and graduate programs, I spent some time in Fargo, North Dakota working, saving up money for graduate school in Indiana. And no, we don't actually speak like they do in the movie. Or maybe a little bit, but not a lot. Well, one day it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was leaving work and I was really hungry. And so I stopped at a taco shop in Fargo, North Dakota. Now, as you can imagine, a taco shop in Fargo, North Dakota, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was the only customer in the store. So I walked in the front door, and there was this woman behind the counter, a young woman, immaculate uniform, visor on straight, big smile, "Welcome to the taco shop, sir, can I take your order?" So I gave her my order, and then she said, "Sir, can I have your name?" And there's still no one in the building, but I thought, okay, well, that's fine. So I said, well, Scott. And she said, sir, can I get your first and last name? And now I started getting a little suspicious, but I said, okay, Scott Fadness. And I swear to God, the next two things did occur. When we exchanged money, she looked at me and she said, sir, could you step out of line and wait over here until your food's ready? Now I looked behind me and there was nobody. So I'm a compliant person, so I did that. I stood over to the side and waited for my order. When the order was ready, she walked up to the microphone, looked around and said, Scott Fadness, your order is ready. Now, what does that story have to do with why versus what? Had that employee been told by their manager why they were doing the job that they were doing, that they were supposed to provide a positive customer experience for that individual when they walked in the door, they would have adapted what they were doing in order to accomplish that. Well, we're a little bit like that here in Fishers. We're guilty of that. I'm guilty of that. Where we as city leaders, we focus so much on what we're doing instead of why we're doing it. So today we're going to take a time out because there are a lot of things going on in this community. There's absolutely, unequivocally, some very exciting things happening in our community. But I want to take a step back and talk about why we're doing the things that we're doing. So let's talk about why. In my opinion, it is my belief that government exists for some fundamental reasons. To make decisions in order to provide for the resources that we need to provide the core services that make our community livable. I doubt any of you would live here today if we didn't have quality schools, good infrastructure, a strong police and fire department. I doubt any of us would live here today without those core functions. And before 2008, I would have said, if someone would have came up to me and said, Scott, do you think we're doing that? I would have said, absolutely. We were providing and making decisions to provide the core services that we need for the long term in our community. But something happened, and actually a convergence of issues happened in 2008 that changed that perspective. And as often is the case, it wasn't that we changed, it was that the world around us changed. And so I started asking myself, well, what were those things that changed? And I want to walk through a couple of those today to give you examples of how our world has changed. As a bedroom community, our economic engine for so many years was building new homes. Prior to 2008, we were building over 1,000 new homes a year. That generated building permit revenue, it generated tax revenue, and it was the economic engine for our community. Okay? Well, something happened in 2008 that we're all aware of, the recession of 2008. And all of a sudden, we cut the number of homes we were building in half, and that revenue dried up. Not only did that dry up, the convergence of issues, the State House passed sweeping tax legislation that capped the amount of money we could ever collect off those homes. Never are we going to collect more than 1% of gross assessed value off a home, ever. It's in the Constitution. Alongside that, they reduced the amount of taxable value of each home by 35%. So that home that we used to collect X off of is now 35% less. A couple other macro things that were happening that kind of snuck up on us. I am the first year of the millennial generation. Our generation was coming into the job market, and we were deciding where we were going to live before we were going to decide where we were going to work. And we had different tastes and different desires than the generation before us. And so you started to hear words like mixed use, sense of place, walkability, things that we never heard before in a suburban landscape. And so as we looked at that, along with the fact that we know that they were moving into the urban areas far more than they ever had before in terms of suburban versus urban, I started asking myself, are we going to deal with this issue? Or are we going to live in some decade of ignorant bliss and allow ourselves to coast into what so many other ex-urban communities have felt, where one day they were great, yesterday they were great, today they were good, and tomorrow they're mediocre? Or were we going to collectively ask the hard questions, look at the future, and adapt accordingly? Well, the question for me was pretty easy to answer. We were going to act. And so I had to get some empirical data and some evidence behind what I was thinking, what I was feeling, and what I thought was going on in our community. And so I commissioned a 6-month study by Policy Analytics to answer a very simple question with a lot of complex variables. The question is simply this: if we continue to operate the way we have over the last 25 years, will we be successful in terms of providing the core resources that we need in 30 years when we're built out? Right at our population peak, which is about 123,000 by 2030. So the question is, are we going to be able to provide enough resources, police, fire, public works, schools, to be able to be a livable community. And the response back after 6 months of challenging variables, looking at different items, the response was simple. No, we were not. We were not sustainable as we were operating today. Now, that is not in any way to cast judgment on what people have done up to date, because we had done some extraordinary things and we are an extraordinary community. The question is, how will we continue to be an extraordinary community long into the future? And so they came up with 6 very simple, broad, sweeping policies recommendations to make sure that we are sustainable for the future. Excuse me. First, as we shift from property taxes to income taxes, we know that we have to provide more and more job opportunities right here in Fishers. Not only from a revenue generation standpoint, but from a quality of life standpoint. My wife, Anna, used to work downtown, and I could tell on the phone immediately by the tone of her voice what the traffic was like that day. So imagine allowing those individuals to get an hour or 2 back of their life to spend with their kids, go to the gym, or just enjoy themselves. So employment opportunities are critical. We just talked about how the millennials choose where they're going to live and then figure out where they're going to work. And so we need to invest in amenities that are going to attract the top talent in the 21st century economy. And so when we look at things as silly as a park, right? Things that used to be just simple quality of life issues, they're critical to economic development. Take Flat Fork Park, for instance. When we looked at that park, we said, what is it going to take to attract the next generation of talented millennials? And so instead of building just baseball diamonds and merry-go-rounds and things of that nature, we built a park like none other around. You know, a 60-foot sledding hill, boardwalk through the trees. I mean, really unique items to attract that next generation of best and brightest to our community. We have to promote quality construction. One of my favorite things to do on Sundays, Anna and I go drive around neighborhoods. We just drive all over Fishers. And one of the things that continually concerns me is the quality of construction in our residential and commercial development. I worry about the homes today that are 10 years old that look like they're 30 years old. And so we have to ensure that when a new development comes into our community, that it has the utmost in construction standards for the long term. We need to incentivize redevelopment of residential and commercial corridors. We are only as strong as our weakest link. And so all of our neighborhoods, and we're going to talk more about some initiatives to truly address this, but all of our neighborhoods need to see continual vibrancy. We need to collaborate to maintain a quality school system, and I can honestly say I believe this with no shred of arrogance, that our school system and our city have one of the best relationships of anywhere around in the state of Indiana, and we will continue to push that envelope and find creative and innovative ways to work together. And finally, we need to prioritize high-quality, effective public safety. Public safety represents 70% of your annual operating budget of the city, police and fire. So we need to ensure that they're not only effective, but they are efficient for the long-term financial viability of our community. And so now when we wrap all of those ideas together and we kind of describe what does that city look like for the future, it paints a picture to me of a smart, vibrant, entrepreneurial city. That's the vision I have for our community. And so I want to talk today a little bit about what each one of those words means and put some real tangible items behind them so that you understand exactly what it is I'm referring to, and talk about what we're going to do in the future to ensure that it happens. So let's talk about a smart city. Remember, one of those core tenets of making sure that we're sustainable for the future is being an efficient and effective public safety agency. So what does that have to do with this burned out hallway? 2 months ago, on a residential fire, the first fire engine due at the house got there, and 2 of our firefighters, firefighter Booster and firefighter Stoltz, walked into this home with a water can while they waited for the line to be charged, crawled down that hallway and made a stand in that hallway and kept the fire at bay. 2 guys kept the fire at bay until a water line could be charged. To me, that is an efficient and effective delivery of services. And Chief Arusa and his leadership team are becoming more and more effective every day on the fire ground. In those moments where it counts most, they're becoming more and more efficient and effective. And we don't always talk about that when it comes to police and fire, but it's so critical and so important. Not only are they focusing on the fire ground, but they're also trying to figure out how they can add value back to their residents when they're not on a 911 call. Under Chief Arusa's leadership, Chief Davison, our EMS division chief, we have a gentleman here, Josh Mailing. Josh Mailing helped spearhead our community paramedicine program. So what is a community paramedicine program? It's our fire department reaching out to our residents who are, at times, in need of specific items, small items, like, for instance, someone to stop in after they've been to the hospital and make sure they're taking their medication correctly. For instance, the first individual that we helped that was discharged from the hospital, Josh Mailing found an issue with their prescriptions. Talked to the doctor, sorted it out. That doctor told us that had we not found that issue, guaranteed that person would have ended up back in the hospital. Now there again, that's our fire and EMS team trying to demonstrate value back to the residents and being efficient and effective well beyond the fire ground. Do you know what the number one injury is in Fishers? Falls. People falling down. And so a simple solution that Chief Arusa and his team have come up with, we'll go out to your home and we'll do an evaluation of your home to ensure that you don't have any trip hazards. What a simple solution to a complex problem, right? And here our guys are doing that every day to become more efficient and more effective. But it's not just our fire department and our public safety agencies that are doing extraordinary things. This is Officer Mike Taylor and his team. And for those, and I love to tell this conversation because for those of you that come up to me at cocktail parties and say, the only reason we have too many police officers, they're always stopping people and giving speeding tickets. It's these conversations that I love to have. And first of all, let me tell you how extraordinary it is to have a police chief, and I tell them this all the time, that's been the police chief longer than I've been alive. And Chief Kale has hired every single police officer we have. And the fact that today they are continuing to innovate is an extraordinary testament to what that man's leadership skills are. And so this group is called the Crime Reduction Unit. This Crime Reduction Unit was born, again, out of our lieutenants looking at how we can innovate and fight crime in our community. And so this group does not fit the traditional patrol model that you would think of in a police department. They go out and they actively seek the criminal element in our community. And for those of you that don't think there's a criminal element in our community, this was instilled in August, and from August to January, they're responsible for 67 felony arrests, 25 misdemeanor arrests, and they have turned over 19 informants to the Hamilton County, Boone County Drug Task Force. So really, truly extraordinary work, and from what I hear this year, they're going to again be aggressive, and I think those numbers are going to far exceed what they're doing today. So I'm very proud of the work that's already been done on the ground level with our police and our fire department. Now, some of you know that I am completely biased when it comes to snow removal. I have to tell you that I couldn't be more proud of the work that Eric Pethel and his Public Works Department does. And let me give you just a case in point, some metrics. The American Public Works Association says the gold standard for snow removal is to have your main thoroughfares, so like 116th Street, 126th Street, the snow removed off of those roads in 48 hours. Eric's goal and his staff's goal is to have every one of your roads, including your cul-de-sacs, cleaned off in 48 hours. All the roads. And not only that, in the middle of the night while you're sleeping, they go out and they clean 115 acres of parking lot to ensure that our schools can open the next day. I always tell that story when I go to the schools, and they ask me, well, what does a mayor do? And I tell them, well, I'm the guy that makes sure that you have to go to school the next day after snow. They love that. But not only are we working on getting those parking lots clean, but we're saving hundreds of thousands of tax dollars to put back into the classroom. And there is no more critical of a time for that, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But again, we're being noticed for this type of thing. Eric notified me the other day that the American Public Works Association has nominated Fishers for a national award for snow removal. That's pretty extraordinary considering we're not Wisconsin and we're not in the Northeast. But that tells you the commitment and innovation that's coming out of some of our core services, police, fire, and public works. And there are so many more examples of efficiency that I could get into, but for the sake of brevity today, I won't. But it's not only our ability to be efficient and effective when it comes to government services, it's our ability to attack big public policy issues head on. Now, this number should be concerning to all of you. 157. Last year in 2014, 157 times our police department was called to a situation where someone was suffering with such a critical issue with mental health that they were either going to do harm to themselves or harm to someone else. 2 days ago in the Indy Star, the state released a report that said our teens are more likely to think of suicide than any other state in the union. Ladies and gentlemen, we have residents, neighbors, friends, and family suffering in quiet despair today with the issue of mental health. And for a community that prides itself on being smart, vibrant, and entrepreneurial, that's just not good enough. And so we're working right now. We have a group of people, schools, police, fire, clergymen, businessmen, all coming together, clinical professionals, to answer a simple question. If we were to commit our collective will as a community towards this issue, what can we do and what should we do? Now, I tell you that today not because I'm confident that we're going to come up with the utmost solution to this complex problem, but I tell you it because I'm so proud of the fact that this is a community that's willing to challenge the status quo and come together in a collaborative process to try to attack these problems. So there'll be more to come on this particular issue. So that's, to me, an efficient and effective delivery of services, but that's not all we need to do to be a smart city. We have to be a well-planned city. So this is not Fishers, okay? This is a picture of a concept that I think is in a lot of our heads about congestion in our community. We have grown so quickly that at times we have forgotten to plan. And so there are several small planning initiatives underway, a transportation plan, a parks master plan. But this today, this right here, is our comprehensive plan. If you were to say to me, Scott, what's our long-range plan? What's our comprehensive plan? This one-page document is our plan. Now, for a city as dynamic and fast-growing as we are, that's not good enough. We have to have a comprehensive strategy and a comprehensive plan that lays out a roadmap for the long-term viability of our community. And so today the time has come for elected leaders, business folks, residents to sit down at the table together and map out a plan for our community for the next 20 years. And so this year we will be rolling out a comprehensive planning initiative. And we will be asking for all of your insights, all of your passions, all of your talents around this community to come to the table and work with us to ensure that we have a plan that befits the vision of this community. So we know that we have to be efficient and effective, and we have to be good planners. But those aren't the only components to a smart city. Next slide, Autumn, please. We have to have a culture of excellence in education. And there is no greater example of that than our Hamilton Southeastern schools. And as a father and as a mayor, there is no bigger point of concern for me today than the current state of our schools. Today, when your child walks into Hamilton Southeastern schools, the primary dollars that it's funded by are the state. And today, your child will be educated at a funding level of $4,898. If your child was to walk into another school in Indiana, East Chicago, IPS, communities like those, urban schools, $7,526. 35% difference in funding. That funding gap is simply not sustainable for our community. I was having a conversation the other day with a librarian that came to see me, a school librarian came to see me. She wanted me to do a video promoting the Scholastic book sale that she was doing. And after the video, I asked simply, well, what is this for? Is this for a nonprofit, or are you raising money for, some sort of issue? She said, no, sir, this is the money we use to buy books for our library. And it blew me away. They have done as much as they can with as little as they have. And we are at a critical juncture. Now, I want to personally thank Representative Todd Houston, our representative, for the work that he's doing on this down at the State House. This requires a legislative fix. And Representative Houston, he couldn't be here today, but if he was, I would ask you to go up to him and thank him for his work. The House budget bill that had just recently passed the House has a significant shift in funding involved in that. Now, we have a long ways to go. It has to pass the Senate. And so I encourage each and every one of you to get engaged, get involved on this particular issue. Now is the time for our schools. And so I need you to reach out to your state senators and tell them, please support the House version of this budget so that we can bring back sustainability to our school system. None of us argue that the schools facing more difficult socioeconomic issues should get more funding. This is a question of sustainability. How can we continue to be an economic engine for the state of Indiana when we do not have enough funding to fund our schools. So again, 3 things that make us a smart city: efficient and effective delivery of services, a well-planned community, and a culture of excellence in education. So now that we're a smart city, how do we become a vibrant city? One of the most iconic pictures that you'll see is of the amphitheater, where we had over 105,000 people show up. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. I apologize. We're going to go to 96th Street. In a growing community, oftentimes what you will find, specifically with Fishers, we grow to the north and we grow to the east, and we're so interested in all of those new areas of growth. But we forget about the older neighborhoods. We forget about the older commercial corridors. And we do that at our own risk. And so today, I'm announcing that we have collected, because of Jeff Hill's work, our engineering director, over $10 million of federal funds to reinvigorate that important transportation corridor on the 96th Street corridor from the bridge to Mollenkampf Road, where you will see roundabouts, you will see 4-lane roads, pavement rehab, and new streetscape. That, coupled with a renewed effort to connect all those businesses down there in a business council, and I know a commitment by Chief Kale and I to ensure that when the criminal element crosses 96th Street, they are welcomed by the most professional police department in the state of Indiana and ushered right back. But it's not just our commercial corridors that we need to be concerned about. A lot of our neighborhoods are aging, and we need to ensure that there is vibrancy in those neighborhoods. And so it's the little things that make a difference in those neighborhoods. Today I'm excited to announce, and it seems simple, but it's so important, a broad initiative in the Orchards, Sunblest, Country View, Roxbury, and the Pines to renew all of their sidewalks. So where there are issues with trip hazards, where there's not ADA capacity, we're going to go in and we're going to fix all of those. We're going to repave a number of the streets in Roxbury and the Pines. Together we can ensure, between that and our Keep Fishers Beautiful program, that the long-term viability is there for these neighborhoods as well as the newer parts of our community. Now, going to one of my favorite things, the amphitheater. Last year, 105,000 people came to the amphitheater for our free programs. And this year is going to be an even bigger year. And why is this so important? We're going to talk about why those connections, those family traditions are so important to the long-term viability of our community. But before I do that, I have to tell you, I have 2 really big announcements of people that are going to come to the amphitheater this year, and I was told just a couple days ago that their agents will not allow me to announce it today. But I'll tell you this, if you like 80s music, you're going to love this summer. It's going to be great. It's going to be exciting. Well, let me just talk a little bit more about the thought process behind why these community events are so important, why we focus so much attention on them. When I took over the Parks Department a few years ago, we were canceling 42% of our programs for a lack of attendance. And I started asking myself, well, why would that be? Is it a marketing issue? And what is the issue here? And what I realized, it was a product issue. Our community was telling us time and time again, these small individual programs were not what they were interested in. They were interested in something that the community could provide that no one else could provide, a sense of community. And so we started new programs like this, okay? We dug a hole in a park and threw water and mud in it. And 1,000 kids showed up the first year, and 2,000 kids showed up the second year, for nothing more than to just be a kid. But imagine that kid every year now as they grow up, and that is a tradition that they remember about their community. Or on a Friday night, if you and your wife or you and your husband decide to go out to the amphitheater for a free concert and sit on the lawn and listen to Jenny DeVoe. Those are the traditions that make up the DNA and the fabric of what a community is. Wild ideas like this one that the Parks Department came up with. This was a blacklight party where they literally stood on stage with thumping music and dumped blacklight paint on teenage kids. And the kids loved it. I don't get it, but they loved it. Boo Bash. Boo Bash had 6,000 people. 6,000 people show up for Boo Bash. That vibrancy and that tradition that we're developing here is so, so critical to the long-term viability of our community. And you're going to see more and more community events as we move forward. And so we know now that we're a smart and a vibrant community, but I want to talk for some time now about this vision of an entrepreneurial city. And I can't imagine a more important time for this conversation to come up. I was recently reading an article that shocked me in terms of statistics. For the first time in 35 years, 2008, in America, more companies closed than opened. More companies closed than opened in 2008. And that trend has not changed. Each year in America, we are closing more companies than we're opening. Now that should be a concern for all of us, because we know for a fact that job growth and wealth development comes from small and upstart companies. So how do we, as a community, combat that and position ourselves to be successful? Well, I think it was fate or good luck that I was able to run into a guy with a similar passion that I did about redefining 21st century economic development a few years back by the name of John Wexler. He's here today. And if we could all just give John a round of applause. This guy is tireless. He is the living embodiment of an entrepreneurial tornado. And but it's so critical. So we decided that we were going to rethink how economic development was done. Instead of constantly chasing companies from one place to another and basically having to give them significant incentives to draw them here, what if we created an environment that just attracted the human talent that would create new companies? And so we started with one simple idea. Let's just create a physical space for these folks to do this. And we started in the basement of the library, 16,000 square feet. We're 2.5 years into it, and let me just give you some statistics on the success of Launch Fishers to date. We now have 438 members. Our goal after 2 years was to have 200. In 2014, $4.2 million of private venture capital was invested into the companies that Launch Fishers. We've had successful spin-outs of Launch Fishers, The Haven, Blue Bridge Digital. So we're seeing tremendous amount of success, and people are paying attention. John toured, I think, probably 25 different cities from across the state of Indiana through Launch Fishers to share this idea and this concept of what we're trying to do. But we knew we could not stop at just the physical location. We knew we had to develop programs to wrap around that. And so we partnered with the Lieutenant Governor in a program called Launch Indiana. What Launch Indiana is all about is those folks that have high potential, high growth companies all throughout the state of Indiana may not be linked to the right network of social people to be able to talk about how we do a pitch, how do we get venture capital money. And so today, John has a group of seasoned entrepreneurs that reach out to these companies. We've coached and counseled 60 different companies throughout the state of Indiana on how to develop and how to grow. So not only are we committed to Launch Fishers in this entrepreneurial city, but we're committed to repopulating wealth throughout the state of Indiana and continuing to be a thought leader in entrepreneurialism. Along with Launch Indiana, we did FailFest. FailFest was an extraordinary effort by John, where we brought in seasoned entrepreneurs to come in and talk about how they failed and what that means, to remove the stigma of failure. He even asked me to get up as a politician and talk about how I failed. And so my speech was around how I try too hard and care too much. But we need to go further. Our community needs to embrace this entrepreneurial culture and the values associated with it. And I can think of no better place to start than in the early generations and in the schools. And so today, in partnership with Launch Fishers, I want to announce the Launch Fellowship Program, where we're going to identify those students in our schools with an entrepreneurial aptitude, and we're going to expose them to 1 week of boot camps with John, where they learn about lean startup principles, and they learn about how to interact and how to do pitches. And at the end of that week, they're going to be matched up with entrepreneurial companies, and they're going to get real-life experience as an entrepreneur for a summer internship. And because of their participation in this, Launch Fishers is going to pay for half of their salary for the summer, and the companies will match the other half. Together, we can develop the entrepreneurial values in this next generation that will ensure the economic viability for not only Fishers, but the state and the country. It is that important, and I am 100% committed to the vision of an entrepreneurial city. Thank you. It's not just the startup companies that are noticing what we're doing here. And this is what I think is so exciting. I want to tell you a story about Anderson. So Anderson's a gentleman on the right with my hairline. Anderson was running a successful company in Los Angeles. And he and his wife had decided that they wanted to move back to the Midwest. And so they started looking, and they started contacting all the state economic development agencies, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, And they came to Indiana, and they set up a tour to come see Fishers. Now, Tom Dickey and his economic development team, being the crack crew that they are, they did some homework, and they said, hey, this guy's kind of an entrepreneur, kind of a tech guy. Maybe we should have this meeting over at Launch Fishers. And so we did. We had it at Launch Fishers. I couldn't be there, but Tom decided to invite John Wexler as well. And I'll never forget, I texted Tom to find out how the meeting was going. And Tom texted back, well, ... John now has us all on bicycles, and we're riding around the downtown, and he's explaining the vision of an entrepreneurial city. And I have to admit, I was like, oh, man, John. But lo and behold, that night, Anderson canceled all of his other visits in Indiana, came back to my office the next morning and talked about how he can be a part of that vision. And I'm proud to say that Anderson and his family are now Fishers residents. They lease space in our new Meyer & Agent building, and their company is growing. And how exciting is that? So when we think about Launch Fishers as an economic engine, think about all the things that have spun off from there. Not only that, but Meyer & Agent. If you were to ask the Meyer & Agent company why they wanted to locate in downtown Fishers, part of it would be because they wanted to be near this entrepreneurial culture, this Launch Fishers. Jarden Enterprises, a Fortune 500 company, negotiated in their economic development deal for 600,000 square feet in Fishers, 10 memberships to Launch Fishers. That's pretty extraordinary. And so I will tell you today, Launch Fishers is out of space. We're busting at the seams. And I'm committed to finding them a new facility so we can continue this vision. We are perfectly aligned with the people, the place, and the economics to make Fishers a very viable community for the long term. And after all, that is why government exists. So today, I want to leave you with just one simple request, and that is to engage in your community. Engage on whatever level that you can. I've come to the conclusion that I myself and city government alone cannot make these things happen. And so volunteer for one of Lena Carlino's sports teams coaching them. Volunteer with your church. Get involved in a nonprofit. Mentor a child. Together, if we work together, our collective future is very bright. I want to thank you all for the privilege and honor of being your first mayor. It is truly the honor of a lifetime for me. And I wish you all a very good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you.